the edge of Jefferson and St. Charles Parish. I said, why is there an 11-foot wall of water? So I called the National Hurricane Center and I said, Brian, why is there an 11-foot wall of water? And he said, there's a levee there. I said, there is no levee there. I've driven up and down that section of the road, there is no levee. And he said, well, hang on, I'll call you back. He calls me back. He said, the Army Corps of Engineers says there's a levee there. I said, there is no levee there. We cannot have this 11-foot wall of water just standing there for no reason. And so the Hurricane Center sent the chief modeler, who is a super geeky guy, okay? So he gets excited because he never gets to go anywhere. And he gets to go to New Orleans to see. And so we go over there, the head of the National Weather Service from Slidell, me, the state official, the gentleman from Miami from the National Hurricane Center, who is the super geek modeler, and the Corps of Engineers guy comes in his own car. We drive to the spot, stand there on completely flat ground, and the Corps of Engineers guy says to me, why are you trying to create trouble? And I said, well, what are we going to tell people when it floods over here? Because this water is going to go into St. Charles Parish. It is going to flood over there. And he said, well, we have no money to build this levee. Well, how are you going to get the money to build the levee if you don't tell them what the problem is, that there's no levee here? So after that, it took about 12 years to build that levee. It took a long time, but the levee eventually did get built in that spot because the model showed that there would be flooding there if a hurricane came at the right angle. So anyway, after the project was done, I didn't have a job, right? Because I gave up my budgeted state slot. And so I looked around and said, you know what? I really enjoy working with taking data, taking models, taking information, and figuring out how to keep people safe, how to be more resilient, how to plan better, how to respond better. And so I think I'll just start a company, and I called it Innovative Emergency Management. Built the logo myself, which is still the logo of the company, and started off by saying, okay, I'll hang my shingle out, see if I can find some customers that want this kind of talent and this kind of skill. And it's been 32 years now and I really enjoy what I do, because it is about doing good and doing good business. And the two things don't have to be separate from each other. So whenever you're trying to do something, I tell my folks, whether they have been here for 25 years, I have people who have worked for me for 25 years, or they've started working for the last 25 days. I say, look at the mission and think about what you're trying to do. If you're trying to write a plan for someone, that day will probably come when that plan is needed. And how many lives can you save? What is it that will be important on that day? Make sure that you do that to the best of your ability. We don't always know everything there is to know. We don't always have all the money that's necessary to investigate the problem the way it needs to be investigated. But do the best that you can for that. And I'll give you an example of that. So in 2004, we won a contract to do catastrophic planning for the United States. We've maintained that contract since then in multiple rebids of that contract, and we just won it again last year in 2016. But in 2004, when we got started, once we won the contract, we went to, it was with FEMA, and we went to meet with FEMA, and they said, you hear this question, what keeps you awake at night? And so we said, where do you want to start? What keeps you awake at night? And they said, a hurricane striking New Orleans, that's what we want to do first. So we got started, and there was a gentleman here who was the state emergency management director for the state of Louisiana called Mike Brown, not the Mike Brown, Colonel Mike Brown, who was the emergency management director for the state of Louisiana. And he was an old-line civil defense director in the sense that he was a practical man. He understood this hurricane can occur, and he had been pushing for planning work to be done. And so he had gone to FEMA and said, we really need to look at how to plan for this better. So they told us to get started, and we created, they said that normally what you do is you write a plan, you do the training on that, then you run an exercise to see how everybody gets it. And that's sort of the preparedness loop that ensures that people are ready. But people at FEMA, as well as in the state of Louisiana, felt that there was not enough time to do all that. So they said, let's cut it short and do a planning exercise. So we get everybody together that has a role in a hurricane and develop the plan of what we're going to do together. Because normally plans are written by a separate group of people. They write the plans, then their training is done. So that set of planning exercises came to be known as Hurricane Pam. Here's an inside story. Pam was the name of the wife of Colonel Mike Brown. That was why the name was chosen. And we created a fictional hurricane called Hurricane Pam. Later on, it turned out to be Hurricane Katrina, which was almost precisely the same track that Katrina took, almost precisely the same strength that Katrina had. And the resulting devastation in our modeling was almost the same, even though we didn't break the levee in the model. But it's like a bathtub. If you don't break the sides of it, it just fills up to the height of the bathtub. So we had pretty much the same amount of water projected in Hurricane Pam that occurred in Hurricane Katrina. And we projected all the consequences, which is how many people would be displaced, how many people would need to be rescued, how many people would be affected, how many kids would be out of school. And after Hurricane Katrina occurred, it was a scientific bullseye in prediction of what would happen in a hurricane of that kind. The one factor that we got completely wrong was the number of deaths. So we projected 60,290 deaths in our modeling. And the reason is because historically only 30% of the people have evacuated New Orleans in the face of a storm. But because this planning effort was still going on, in fact, we had a workshop just 3 weeks before Hurricane Katrina struck, that there were a lot of people that were aware, the mayor was aware, the Mike Brown, the head of FEMA, was aware, the governor's office was aware that there was such a catastrophic event that could cause enormous loss of life. And so they, when the storm was approaching Louisiana, and it was a very well-predicted storm, I mean, right from the start, when it got close to the Gulf, it was always predicted to go to New Orleans. That the National Hurricane Center director, who's Max Mayfield, and the people at FEMA and the others were just pushing hard for evacuation. Now, historical fact, New Orleans never has ordered a mandatory evacuation, because there's been a myth in the city held by numerous mayors, not just the mayor who was there at that time, that if they call an evacuation, they're going to be liable for the economic losses of the businesses that have to shut down. So they never order an evacuation. Well, when you don't order an evacuation, most of the people don't leave. So eventually in New Orleans, a evacuation order was given on Sunday prior to landfall. And the second thing, which was to the credit of the mayor, and the second thing that was done that was very instrumental in saving lives, was that the previous year there was a hurricane that almost hit New Orleans, Hurricane Ivan. And so the governor, there was an evacuation. It was a mess. People spent 20 hours stuck on the roads. And the governor said, we need to fix this problem. And so she directed the Department of Transportation Development to develop a contraflow plan so that both lanes, both sides of the interstate would go outward from New Orleans rather than some going inwards and some going outwards. So that plan was developed to double the capacity of the transportation system, essentially. It required coordination with Mississippi, so when you go up I-55 and you get to Mississippi, you know what to do over there. That plan and the decision to evacuate people, which resulted from the Hurricane Pam work, ended up saving about 59,000 lives. So it's wonderful to see what technology and information and effort can do that is really meaningful in keeping people safe and secure. So I'm going to switch horse for a few minutes, and then I'll take questions. I'll go to the business side of things. As General Honoré mentioned in his speech, there's sea level rise occurring. We can all see that. There is a change in the climate. We are seeing a lot more disasters. And the business of disaster continues to grow. There is more opportunity in disaster work. When I started this company, there wasn't, I tell people that I was in disasters before it became sexy to be in disasters. So after 9/11, after Katrina, there's been a lot more funding in disaster. It's unpredictable how long the funding is going to stay, but there is a lot of funding in disasters. But it's a business that requires moving from place to place. The disaster is here today. We worked on Hurricane Sandy. We did the same work there for housing recovery for the state of New York. And now we are in Louisiana and then there's the disaster that occurred in North Carolina from Hurricane Matthew. So it moves around. If there's a catastrophic earthquake in California, the work is over there. So it requires being mobile. As the head of FEMA used to say, expeditionary. You have to be expeditionary, which is ready to go to the place where the disaster is to work on the disaster. And the focus, I think, is really important, which is the focus should be on the mission. And in the case of the Restore Louisiana program, we won the contract after a very long and exhaustive process. WT is here, he can tell you that. And the three things that we said were objectives, which still remain true. First is speed. The people who were affected in North Louisiana, it's been more than a year. The people who were affected by the August floods, it's almost coming on to a year. The second one is accuracy, because what's happening in the disaster field is more and more you have to do very precise accounting for who was given what money and why they were given the money. And if you don't do that, the federal government comes and wants the money back. So in the case of some of the disasters, they've asked for $1 billion back, which has been spent, mind you. It's already been given out, and then they come in and say, give the money back to us. And we are not in any state with the state budget to have a federal ask for the return of the dollars back. So accuracy is very important. And the third one is empathy, because you cannot forget that people have suffered enough already through the flood, and for months they've been out of their home. And they deserve our care and service to them in doing the work.